In this video, I'm going to expose 5 truths about prenups and postnups most people never hear until it's too late. They tell you a prenup is just paperwork. A formality. Just in case. But here's the truth no one says out loud, that signature can control everything that happens after your marriage ends. Your money. Your home. Your freedom to rebuild. Most people think prenups and postnups are for millionaires or people who don't trust love. That's a lie. Because the moment you say, I do, you've already signed a contract, the one written by your state's divorce laws. And if you don't write your own terms, the law decides for you. I've seen people lose everything, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't understand what they were signing, or worse, what they didn't sign. And here's the craziest part. Even your lawyer might not tell you what's really hidden inside these documents. Why? Because prenups and postnups aren't just legal tools, they're strategic weapons. Used right, they protect you. Used wrong, they destroy you. So before you sign anything, or dismiss the idea completely, you need to hear this. Let's start with the one nobody expects. And if you're going through divorce or just want to protect yourself before it starts, hit subscribe now, because I break down what most lawyers never say out loud. Truth 1, a prenup isn't ironclad, even if you think it is. Most people believe that once a prenup is signed, it's set in stone, untouchable. You sign it, file it away, and assume it'll protect you if things ever fall apart. But here's the shocking truth. Prenups get thrown out every single year. And not because someone cheated the system, but because the system has rules of its own. A prenup only protects you if it was signed fairly, transparently, and voluntarily. 3 words that sound simple, but in divorce court, they're everything. Let's break that down. Fairly means no hidden money, no buried accounts, no assets mysteriously left off the disclosure list. If you didn't list your income accurately, or if your partner finds out later that you forgot to mention your crypto wallet or side investments, that's grounds for a judge to toss the entire document. Transparency means both sides had a full picture of what was being signed. No last-minute changes. No slipping in an extra clause an hour before the wedding rehearsal. If the court suspects deception, even a hint of manipulation, it's done. And then there's voluntarily. That's the one that destroys more prenups than anything else. Because when judges hear that someone felt pressured, emotionally, financially, or even just by the ticking clock before the wedding, the whole agreement can collapse like paper in rain. I've seen cases where a prenup was handed to a bride the night before the ceremony. No time to read, no independent lawyer, just sign here, it's nothing serious. And guess what? Years later, when the marriage ended, that same document, the one meant to protect the wealthier spouse, was shredded in court. According to the American Bar Association, voluntariness isn't about the absence of physical force. It's about real understanding. Did both people truly know what they were agreeing to? Did they have access to independent legal counsel? Did they sign with a clear mind, not under guilt, fear, or emotional manipulation? If the answer to any of those is no, the judge has the power to declare that prenup invalid. And here's the part few lawyers admit. Most prenups aren't thrown out because of what's in them. They're thrown out because of how they were signed. The timing. The pressure. The missing signatures or rushed notary. Even small procedural details, like not having a 7-day review period in states like California, can make the whole agreement worthless. So before you assume your prenup will protect you, ask yourself. Was it signed freely? Was it reviewed independently? Was it built on full disclosure? Because if not, it might protect no one. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because even if your prenup does hold up in court, that doesn't mean you're safe. In fact, there's something much more dangerous hiding in plain sight. Something no amount of signatures or fine print can protect you from. Because Truth 2 reveals the one thing your prenup can never control, and it's the reason so many people lose everything they thought was guaranteed. Truth 2, your prenup can't protect you from everything. Most people walk into marriage believing a prenup is a shield, a way to control every outcome if things ever fall apart. They think, if I write it down, it's law. But here's the truth nobody tells you, a prenup can't protect you from everything. And what it can't protect you from, are the things that matter most. See, a prenup is powerful when it comes to money, property, debt, businesses, inheritance, future earnings. But when it comes to children, the rules change completely. Because no matter what you write on that piece of paper, the court doesn't care about what you both agreed to before you had kids. The court only cares about what's best for the child, right now. That's not opinion, that's federal and state law. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services makes it clear. Child custody and support cannot be predetermined or negotiated away in private contracts. Why? Because from a legal perspective, children aren't property. You can't assign their future like an asset. You can't agree who they'll live with, how much support they'll get, or who decides their schooling, years before any of that even exists. And that's the part that stuns people in divorce court. They walk in with a neatly typed clause that says, "If we separate, I'll have full custody." And the judge looks at it, and tosses it aside like it never existed. Because the court's responsibility isn't to honor what two adults wanted then. It's to protect what's right for the child now. You could have signed a prenup in good faith, with all the right intentions. You might have thought, we're just being practical. We're avoiding chaos later. But if a judge sees that agreement as limiting a child's access to either parent, or restricting financial support below state guidelines, it's instantly void. This is where even seasoned lawyers tread carefully. Some will let those custody lines slip into the contract because it makes the client feel secure. But they know those words won't survive the courtroom. That's why the smartest attorneys never promise that a prenup will cover everything. Because it can't. And pretending it can only sets you up for heartbreak later. So what can you do? You focus on what's actually enforceable. Asset division. Debt responsibility. Ownership of a business. That's where prenups have real power. And when it comes to your kids, you prepare differently. You document your parenting. You build a consistent, loving relationship. You show up, every single time. Because when custody becomes a fight, the court won't ask, "What did you sign?" They'll ask, "Who has shown up?" And that's the part nobody wants to hear, because it's not something you can write down, notarize, or control. It's something you have to live. So yes, your prenup can decide who keeps the house. But it can't decide who keeps the children. It can protect your income. But not your influence as a parent. And no contract, not even one drafted by the best attorney in your state, can overrule a judge's obligation to protect a child's well-being. So before you sign one thinking it's your insurance policy, remember. It's a legal tool, not a parental pass. And the moment a child is involved, the rules reset. But even if your prenup is perfectly legal, perfectly balanced, there's a trap most people still fall into. Because what happens after you're married can completely undo everything you thought you protected. And that's where Truth 3 comes in. The emotional landmine that turns even the most airtight prenup into a weapon against you. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, don't forget to like this video. It tells YouTube this topic actually matters and helps more people avoid these traps. Truth 3, postnups can backfire if you sign them out of guilt. When most people hear the word postnup, they think it's just a late prenup. A safety net for couples who didn't sign one before the wedding. But the truth is, a postnup is a completely different beast. Because unlike a prenup, which happens when everyone's calm, excited, and hopeful, a postnup usually happens after the damage. After the argument. After the betrayal. After the trust has already been broken. And that's where it gets dangerous. A lot of couples turn to a postnup to rebuild what's already cracked. After an affair, one partner says, "Let's make it official, I'll sign whatever you want, just don't leave." After a financial blow-up, it's, "I'll put your name on everything. I'll prove I'm serious." It sounds like love. It feels like peace. But legally, it's a minefield. Because the law doesn't just look at the signature, it looks at why you signed. If that postnup was created in the middle of an emotional storm, during reconciliation, guilt, or panic, it can be one of the easiest contracts to destroy in court. Here's why. Family law judges are trained to look for undue influence, any situation where one person had the emotional upper hand. It's not just about money. It's about leverage. When one spouse says, "Sign this, or our marriage is over," that's not negotiation, that's coercion in disguise. Even the American Bar Association's Family Law section warns that postnups must be entered into voluntarily, fairly, and with full financial transparency. Meaning, both people must know exactly what's being signed, have their own legal counsel, and feel no emotional pressure to agree. And let's be honest, how often does that really happen in the middle of a crisis? One spouse is drowning in guilt, trying to fix what's broken. The other is hurt, angry, or terrified of losing stability. So they sign the paper, not out of strategy, but out of emotion. And when that happens, the court doesn't see it as fairness. They see it as imbalance. Because one person was desperate to save the marriage, while the other was desperate to control it. I've seen cases where a husband, after an affair, signed away half his business in a postnup just to prove his loyalty. 3 years later, the marriage collapsed anyway, and he tried to argue that the agreement wasn't fair. The court agreed. Why? Because it was signed under emotional distress. That's the brutal reality. Postnups signed in moments of guilt rarely hold their weight. And here's the part most people don't realize: when that document is thrown out, it doesn't just reset the deal, it reopens the wounds. All that pain, all that proof of love, gone in one legal motion. So before you sign a postnup, ask yourself: are you doing this because it's fair, or because you're afraid? Because a contract signed from fear isn't protection, it's surrender. If you truly want a postnup that lasts, it must come from clarity, not chaos. It must be built on financial truth, not emotional apology. And both sides need to walk into that room with independent attorneys and equal information, not one hand shaking and the other holding a pen. Because love can heal wounds, but it should never be used as leverage for a legal contract. But if you think emotional manipulation is bad, wait until you hear what happens next. Because even if your prenup or postnup was perfectly fair, perfectly signed, and perfectly filed, there's a tiny loophole, one buried in the paperwork, that can erase the entire thing. And that's Truth 4, the hidden detail that has destroyed thousands of contracts without anyone realizing it. Truth 4, a simple mistake can void the entire contract. You can pour hours into drafting a prenup. Hire the best attorney in town. Spend thousands making sure every line sounds perfect. But if you miss one small, technical detail, that entire document can die the moment it hits the courtroom. This is the silent killer of prenups and postnups. Bad paperwork. Not infidelity. Not betrayal. Not hidden assets. Just one missed line. One missing signature. One notary stamp in the wrong place, and it's all over. Most people don't realize that every state has its own rules for how marital agreements must be executed. And they're not suggestions, they're law. Take California, for example. Under Family Code 1615, both partners must have at least 7 full days between receiving the final draft and signing it. Why? Because the law assumes that rushing someone into signing means they didn't truly understand it. So if your lawyer handed you the final prenup on a Thursday and you signed it that Friday before your wedding weekend, congratulations, you just invalidated your own contract. It happens more often than you'd think. In New York, both parties must sign in front of a notary, no exceptions. In Texas, if one party wasn't given full disclosure of property and debts, that alone can make the prenup unenforceable. And in Florida, if there's evidence of fraud or duress, even perfect paperwork can collapse under the weight of one bad email or text message. The truth is, courts don't just look at what's written, they look at how it was executed. Because the process is part of the protection. That's what most people, and, shockingly, some lawyers, overlook. You'd be amazed how many prenups fail over clerical errors. A missing witness line. An outdated notary stamp. Even printing the wrong version of the document. All those tiny details can be the difference between total protection and total loss. And here's the part that stings: the courts don't fix those mistakes for you. They don't care if your intentions were good. If it's not executed correctly, it's not valid. Period. It's like locking your house, but forgetting to close the door. You feel safe, until the storm hits. And what makes this even more dangerous is how deceptive it feels. People think because their lawyer drafted it, they're covered. But here's the insider truth most attorneys will never say publicly. A prenup is only as strong as its execution record. If your lawyer didn't document the disclosure process, the review period, the independent counsel letters, or the notary verification, that file might look complete, but it's full of legal holes. So before you file it away, ask your attorney. Did we meet every state requirement? Was it notarized correctly? Was the signing period documented? Because when it's too late, you won't be asking your lawyer, you'll be asking a judge. And the judge won't care how heartfelt your intentions were. They'll care about the paper trail. It's a brutal truth, most prenups don't fail because of love, they fail because of logistics. And love doesn't protect you from paperwork. But here's where everything comes together. Because even if your prenup was fair, even if it was transparent, notarized, and perfectly filed, there's still one last truth, the one nobody wants to face, that decides who actually wins when everything falls apart. And that's truth 5, the final reality that separates those who survive divorce, from those who lose everything. If you want a free checklist of what to look for before signing any marital agreement, comment, I need. It's the exact guide attorneys use to catch hidden risks. Truth 5, the real power isn't in the prenup, it's in the paper trail. You see, this is the part they never put in the movies, because it's not glamorous. It's not about diamonds, lawyers, or courtroom drama. It's about paper. Ordinary, boring, silent paper. Because when it comes to divorce court, judges aren't just reading your prenup, they're reading your behavior. Here's what most people never realize, a prenup is only as strong as the story your records tell. You can have the most airtight contract in the world, but if your financial habits contradict what's written inside it, that prenup can crumble in a heartbeat. Let me explain. Say your prenup clearly separates your money and their money. Sounds clean, right? But then, years into the marriage, you start mixing accounts, paying joint bills from your personal funds, moving money back and forth, buying assets together that aren't clearly labeled. What you've just done, without even realizing, is blur the lines. And in court, blurred lines mean lost protection. Because here's what family court judges really care about, patterns. If your paper trail shows consistency, honesty, and transparency, even a weak prenup can hold up. But if your bank statements tell a different story, that's game over. Let's say one spouse hides an account for emergencies. Or sells property quietly before separation. Even if the prenup says they're entitled to keep certain assets, the court can toss that agreement aside, calling it bad faith. Top divorce attorneys agree on this one universal truth. A prenup protects the honest, not the secretive. It's not about how fancy your lawyer is, or how many pages your contract has. It's about whether your life aligns with your paperwork. Think of your prenup like a GPS, it only works if you actually follow the route. Start taking shortcuts, start hiding turns, and eventually, you'll end up somewhere you never meant to be. That's why the smartest people, the ones who stay protected, treat their prenup like a living document. They keep records. They communicate openly. They document financial decisions, not because they're paranoid, but because they understand one thing most couples never do. The court doesn't reward who's right. It rewards who can prove they were right. So yes, get the prenup. But then, back it up with receipts. With consistency. With honesty. Because the real safety isn't in what you sign once. It's in how you live every day after that. And when you understand that, you stop seeing prenups as plans for divorce, and start seeing them as blueprints for accountability. The truth? It's not the paper that protects you, it's the proof. So let's pull this all together, because this is where it really hits home. Prenups and postnups aren't magic shields. They don't guarantee safety, love, or loyalty. They're tools, and like any tool, they're only as good as the hands that use them. Used right, they protect both partners, not from each other, but from confusion, from chaos, from the pain of, I didn't know. Used wrong, they become silent weapons. Pieces of paper waiting to explode the moment trust fades. And here's what most people never hear until it's too late. A signature doesn't mean protection, understanding does. That's why before you sign anything, even something that looks simple, you need to slow down. Get your own lawyer. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Make sure every word reflects fairness, not fear. Because once emotions cool and life moves on, that document becomes your future. And the truth nobody tells you? You don't need to be rich to protect your future, you just need to be informed. Because power doesn't come from money or lawyers. It comes from knowledge, from knowing what you're signing, why it matters, and how it can shape the rest of your life. So before you sign, pause. Read. Ask. And remember, the real protection isn't in the paper you hold. It's in the awareness you carry. If you found this eye-opening, hit subscribe and watch my next video, the 5 divorce documents you should never sign. Because what you don't know about those could cost you everything. Legal disclaimer. This video is for informational purposes only and is not legal advice. Always consult a licensed attorney in your state.